BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And just a quick reminder, every Monday is Zodiac Mondays. Wednesday is an Ask Me Anything. That's an AMA, so please drop your questions below for things that you would like discussed here on the show. And Friday is an Anything Goes. Any subject is fair game, mostly talking about true crime, serial killers, the Zodiac Killer, but any subject is welcome. All right, so please share some ideas in the comment section about what you would like to hear about on this channel, and let's get started. Okay, hello everybody. Today is Wednesday, time for the AMA. That is the Ask Me Anything, the day where I respond to your questions and comments. We go through the material together, and we have a discussion. Welcome to the show. But before we begin, I would like to remind you guys that I am also the host of Astro Psych 400. That is a different channel here on YouTube that focuses more on psychology, sometimes astrology, and it is also the home of the podcast for sleep. Some people were saying that they use BlackBoxOnlineRadio as a way to fall asleep at night, and I thought, why not create something specifically customized to help people do that? And you can find the podcast for sleep on Astro Psych 400. Another great way to support this show is to go over to Amazon.com and look at the book Killer on a White Horse by me, Ned DeHaan. It is a novel, murder mystery, inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, but it is fictional. However, who doesn't love a good mystery? And there is always the Teespring page. Feel free to check out the merchandise, and remember, being weird is not a crime. In this episode, I'm going to talk about some comedians that were taken before their time, as well as responding to the comments that you guys have left about them. And the first one came to us from Playtime, who was talking about the suspicious death of Bill Hicks, who was a comedian that even to this day is still loved by many people, and his material never went away. I first learned about Bill Hicks back in 2017, and it was not by accident that I was also learning a lot about the CIA. I would frequently listen to the lectures from the former CIA operative John Stockwell, who became somewhat famous in the 1980s for sharing the secrets of the CIA. His claim to fame was being the highest-ranking CIA official to go public, or as John Stockwell put it, he went public and actually told the truth. But with Bill Hicks, he was a very entertaining comedian, but he was also very critical of the military-industrial complex, the Reagan administration, and even the CIA for pointing out, Bill Hicks pointed out some of the peculiarities in the Kennedy assassination, and Playtime's comment was about, is it possible that Bill Hicks was murdered by a higher authority because of all of his very, very strong criticisms and drawing attention to some of the secrets of the global elites and such? And I think that we have to look at his claims from the beginning. But before we go any further, I always remember one way that Bill Hicks started a show once when he said that I've been a comedian for about 10 years now, so excuse me while I fake a smile and plow through this horse shit one more time. And I think about that when I go to work all the time. But in terms of the establishment, Bill Hicks was critical of everything about it, not just politicians and the wars, but also like the war on drugs, even if that counts as a war, saying that, yeah, I did a bunch of drugs and I had a really good time. Where's my commercial? But when it comes to the military-industrial complex, I grew up in West Virginia, and I was surrounded by a lot of Reagan Republicans, and everybody would always talk about how the Reagan era was so great. But in that time when I was learning about Bill Hicks and John Stockwell, it was so odd to see two people from the 1980s being so amazingly critical of Ronald Reagan, talking about how he had a defective mind, or that he just was incompetent as a leader. And some of this is even mentioned in the movie The Judge with Robert Downey Jr. and Robert Duvall, saying that Reagan's public image got overshadowed by things like jelly beans and naps, and people back in the 80s talked about that stuff very frequently. I was born in 1988, so I had to learn all this secondhand, if you will, or after the fact. But Bill Hicks notably called out the military-industrial complex because he said that it's just like that scene in a Western movie where one person is pointing a gun at another person and says, "Pick up the gun." It's like, I don't want to pick up the gun. You're gonna shoot me. Pick up the gun. And he picks up the gun and he shoots him. And the guy turns and says, "You saw him. He had a gun." Talking about that's how the military-industrial complex operated in the 1980s, meaning that other countries were armed up. They're sold lots of weapons in the arms trade. Now they are a threat, and now there has to be some type of military intervention. And it's all about fueling the sales of arms, because what John Stockwell wanted to convey to us was that the arms industry became the second largest industry in the world during the 1980s, which also saw the largest peacetime buildup of military arsenals, even though there wasn't something like World War II going on, but there was a peacetime buildup. It was very profitable for the arms companies, and even Oliver Stone described it as that Congress needs money in their coffers, and they need a flow of money to the defense contractors. And somebody like Bill Hicks was able to share this message to a very, very different audience. People who wouldn't be completely connected with some of the more academic style sources. And also, comedy can strip off the mask of the establishment and expose it for what it really is. What Bill Hicks said about the Kennedy assassination was that it would be impossible for Oswald to have been the lone gunman, and even if you were to go to the book depository in Texas, he said at the time they had bars up so you couldn't actually stand where Oswald had allegedly fired the gun. And he's like, there's a reason why they do that, because if you were to go there, you would say, "No fucking way." Maybe if Oswald was hanging by his toes, and he heavily challenged the lone gunman theory, which ergo means that the the government was lying to us, that the official narrative was wrong, that there was some greater involvement with the CIA. Bill Hicks passed away at the age of 32 from pancreatic cancer, but he was he actually murdered by the global elites? Now, I don't know, and I approach these things with a certain sense of skepticism, and I do notice that these theories come up very frequently, because back in 2020, I did 3 episodes on Mae Brussell, who was a predecessor of the conspiracy movement. Like before Alex Jones, there was William Cooper. Before William Cooper, there was Mae Brussell hosting Dialogue Conspiracy, and she passed away in 1988 at the age of 66 from cancer. And there are lots of theories surrounding her death, that because she was so critical of the governments, the CIA, and particularly for Operation Paperclip and the transplanting of Nazi scientists into the United States after World War II. And I mean, we could talk about Mae Brussell for hours, but with Bill Hicks, he also went on to become involved in one of the top 3 worst conspiracy theories ever. I mean, you want to say, did the global elites have something to do with giving him cancer? I said I'm very skeptical of that stuff, but crazier things have happened. However, what are the top 3 worst conspiracy theories of all time? Number 1, there was this guy named Dwight York who was saying that the government was brainwashing black people using a specific agent to do that, and that agent's name was Dr. Seuss, with the green eggs and ham and Sam I Am and Uncle Sam, and he's trying to get black people to swear allegiance to the government. Dr. Seuss is some type of brainwashing corruption agent. And you just have to wonder, like, the thought process. Do only black children read that book, Green Eggs and Ham? And do you have to be black to purchase that book? Why only black people? I mean, like, that definitely is up there with one of these sillier conspiracy theories. Now, Dwight York did do some horrible things, and he is sent to jail for something. I have an episode about him, one of the old gray box recordings. But the second worst conspiracy theory of all time, is the lost episode stuff about how content creators, and I was about to say filmmakers, but really it's more like television, people who are involved in TV will record an episode of a show, and it will be filled with demonic and satanic imagery, all the occult practices of the global elites, and that they've now been indoctrinated, or not indoctrinated, but inducted into the circles of the global elites and all of their wicked witchcraft and such. And one person that was pulled into this web was none other than Seth MacFarlane, the creator of Family Guy and American Dad and The Cleveland Show. And there was this one episode of The Cleveland Show that is called The Lost Episode that no one has seen. It only exists in legend. The character Cleveland Brown, who was voiced by Mike Henry at the time, had these demonic red eyes, and it's just filled with all types of occult imagery. But when I actually read the description of that, I noticed a very, very big problem was it said that the episode started at a place called the Drunken Clam, which is it's not from the Cleveland Show. There's no Drunken Clam in the Cleveland Show. That's the name of a bar in Family Guy. The name of the bar on the Cleveland Show was called the Broken Stool. So I think, to be honest, I said I approached these things with skepticism. With that one, yes, most likely somebody is just making it up. Someone wrote something wild on the internet, and they just ran with it. Somebody ran with it, and they didn't even really do a good job at making something up. But the final one, and the final worst conspiracy theory of all time, is that Bill Hicks, the comedian, faked his death and went on to become radio personality Alex Jones. And the reason why this one is so unbelievably bad is because people actually believed it. I would say maybe 0.5% of people actually think that there's an episode of The Cleveland Show that has occult imagery and glowing red eyes that is set in Quahog instead of Steel Bend, Virginia. 0.5% of people actually believe that. But people were talking about this very passionately online about 5 years ago, that Bill Hicks had faked his death and went on to become the comedian. Not the comedian. Alex Jones is not a comedian. You ever seen that guy try to do stand-up? Well, he didn't. He just did his whole conspiracy theory, ran, "I've got the video of Eisenhower when he calls Chairman Mao a hero," and someone even told him, "Get off the stage unless you're going to be funny," which in all seriousness, you go to a comedy show, you don't want to hear Alex Jones. But the reasons why they thought that Bill Hicks was faked his own death and became Alex Jones were because, number one, Alex Jones appeared to look much older than he actually was. I mean, when you're just sort of yelling about how the global elites have destroyed humanity, sure, you're actually going to age more. I'll give Alex that one. And the second one is that they claim they were unable to document Alex Jones's activities before 1996, when they would have some videos of him on public access television. I don't really buy into that too much. And some other things have come out, particularly the Megyn Kelly interview that she did with Alex Jones when she had that Sunday show for a while, showed some things from his childhood and his teen years, but I mean, not like we're really dealing with real facts here. And Alex Jones openly dismissed it from the beginning when he said, I mean, I'm really not sure the exact order of these events, but he did a very public statement on his radio show when he said, yeah, the people are saying this stuff online that Bill Hicks faked his own death and became Alex Jones. He said became me, but the family of Bill Hicks does not find any humor in that. They're like, he died from pancreatic cancer, and just that's it. They don't find any humor in this wacky conspiracy theory on the internet. But then, Alex Jones did not do any favors by doing a public video where he openly told his audience that he was Bill Hicks. But then what happened was he started laughing at the end of it, and I noticed that when that video was shared numerous times, they cut out the end where he just starts laughing like it's a joke, and again, people are running wild with that. Now, I don't believe that Alex Jones and Bill Hicks are the same person. Instead, I think that I'm just shocked that so many people actually went with that, and people were just making YouTube videos talking about all the comparisons. Look, this really is the guy. He really did this. They were just so passionate about it, it really sounded like they weren't making it up. And moving on to our next spot on this discussion, back in 2019, I did an episode on the death of Sam Kinison that was called just that, The Death of Sam Kinison, Fractured Justice System. And we had a comment come in from Mr. MOGOM who says, I remember reading about Sam's untimely murder. Yes, that's my opinion. Murder. When I read about the trial of Troy, it gave me a sickening feeling. I was blown away fast. And that was the reason why I chose to do that episode on Sam Kinison back in 2019. And Sam Kinison was a very outspoken comedian. He had a very iconic scream. He was also very critical of not only society, but I guess intersectional dynamics, like the way that men and women are expected to behave. I know that's not a definition of intersectional dynamics, but he talked about all of that stuff. And I don't think that we can truly get into this material without having a stronger introduction. So Sam Kinison died as a result of a car accident, and the person named Troy that commenter was referring to is Troy Pearson. And I'm just going to read a little segment here that Troy Pearson was 17 years old when he was driving the car that killed Sam Kinison. Prior to the accident, Pearson had been drinking alcohol. The pickup truck crossed the center line of the roadway while trying to pass another vehicle and went into Kinnison's lane. Kinnison and his wife were on their way to Laughlin, Nevada to perform a sold-out show. Kinnison was knocked unconscious between the seats of his car at the scene of the accident. He was not wearing a seatbelt. His head smashed the windshield and he was pronounced dead at the scene. According to his brother, he was 38 years old. His wife was also injured in the collision, but later, after being taken directly to a hospital for treatment, an autopsy found that Kinnison had sustained multiple traumatic injuries, including a torn aorta. Troy Pearson pled guilty to one count of vehicular manslaughter with gross negligence. He was sentenced to 1 year of probation, 300 hours of community service, and he had a suspended license for 2 years. And the reason why I chose to do that episode back in 2019 was because I just thought that was an unbelievably light sentence. 1 year of probation, 300 hours of community service, and a suspended license. I mean, he killed someone because he was driving drunk. I mean, people can be charged with DUI with death. They can be charged with vehicular manslaughter. And that's why this commenter was referring to that as a murder. But Mr. MOGOM says that, yes, that's my opinion. It's murder, an untimely murder. I mean, the guy was doing things that were not only reckless, but some people do indeed view DUI with death and vehicular manslaughter as forms of murder, even though there isn't the clearest example of intent. We see this in the true crime world because they say if you get behind the wheel and you're drunk, well, what exactly are you expecting to happen? You know that you are going to likely cause an accident which could lead to someone's death, which is the deliberate part, and lawyers can spin things any way that they want. However, he definitely did get a very light sentence, this individual, Troy Pearson. And I do recall a more famous story about the way that Sam Kinison passed away, that in addition to hitting his head and the torn aorta, we heard those details there, he was having a conversation with somebody, and the person wasn't actually there. Like, they said that they were watching him. Like, it's like he was talking to somebody, and he just said, okay, and then he lost consciousness. I mean, that may be a little bit legendary. I mean, I'm not sure about the exact details, and without any type of recording, maybe we won't, but that really seemed rather mystifying all the same. But we had a second comment come in on the episode, The Death of Sam Kinison, Fractured Justice System. Who knows? Sam was a controversial figure. Maybe the judge wasn't a fan and it affected his ruling. One would have to research the judge's similar rulings, but it doesn't look like he was a hanging judge. Now, as far as being a controversial figure, I read this comment and I was like, that's still no excuse for the judge's behavior. Right. But then, after I read this comment, and this was about 2 years ago, I just so happened to have found a clip of Sam Kinison on Larry King Live, and he's doing what? He's criticizing society. He's criticizing the establishment. He was indeed a controversial figure, and he's calling out every aspect of the insanity in the world that we live in. Yeah, absolutely. This guy Michael Powell here, it seems like his comment was a little bit spot on. But one thing, though, that I heard on the Artie Lang show was that Sam Kinison was the biggest party animal of all time. They said that his signature thing was he liked to do gold cocaine, not white cocaine, but gold cocaine, and then eat a pizza. And they just thought that it was absolutely a miserable experience, but Sam Kinison loved it. And the person that Artie Lang was talking to about that was none other than Ralphie May. And I think that's going to be a segue into our third person on this list, because Ralphie May passed away in 2017. And to read those details, on October 6th of 2017, Ralphie May went into cardiac arrest and died. May had been battling pneumonia for several weeks and canceled shows over the previous month. His publicist, Stacy Pokluda, confirmed following his death he was 45 years old. It was later published that hours before his death, May scheduled to do a meet and greet after his final performance at Harrah's in Las Vegas around midnight, but he already showed signs of a deteriorating condition. And I remember after Ralphie May passed away in 2017, I was listening to an episode of the podcast More Stories, which is hosted by Jay Moore, and he was doing a tribute to Ralphie May as not only a comedian, but someone whom he knew personally. But what he brought up was that someone asked him the question, are you born a comedian or do you learn how to become a comedian? And he said, oh, you're born a comedian. It's something about your personality, the way that you interact with people, and Ralphie May was an absolute expert at that. And real quickly, let's just have a listen.
Yeah, the white people here. Oh, he's horrible. He has been making fun of African Americans and now Mexican Americans. He's horrible. I personally would never treat my help that way. That's right, white people. You don't mow your own lawn. Shut the fuck up. Let's keep it real. It's gonna be just correct. Everybody's a goddamn blank American now. You can't say anything about anybody because everybody might get their delicate little feelings hurt. Stop it. They're blank Americans. Nation full of pussies. Fuck that. When was the last time you heard a good chink joke?
And a lot of Ralphie May supporters have simply said stuff in the comment section like, he had balls, he would really say whatever, and he just was always about expression, and the whole concept of if the intention is only to be funny, anything is fair game. And while there isn't a very large conspiracy surrounding the death of Ralphie May, there is around Bill Hicks, and there are some unfinished notes on that subject. Sometimes there are just horrible tragedies in the world. Sometimes there are events that happen that people don't accept too easily, and their response is to deny them or to expect that there has to be some type of outside malicious operation going on, and this becomes the foundation of a conspiracy theory. But do not misunderstand. Sometimes conspiracy theories turn out to be true. Sometimes somebody can be taken out, and I simply do not dismiss something just because it's a conspiracy theory, but instead, I was once going through the material of somebody named Jonathan Kay, who wrote the book Among the Truthers. He's a Canadian journalist who talks a lot about conspiracy theories, and I have 2 episodes about him on BlackBoxOnlineRadio. But what he said was that it's like the conspiracy theorist has a belief system, and then there's reality, which is actually happening, like the chronological and historical timeline. And if the chronological timeline does not coincide with that person's belief system, they use the conspiracy theory as a way to create a bridge between the belief system and reality, between the belief system and the historical timeline of events. And I think that that is somewhat of some interesting food for thought, except for the fact that is extremely dismissive, and that's what Jonathan Kay always got into trouble with, because he just views conspiracy theorists as people who just don't understand or anything, or he just thinks that they're all lost in a wormhole of life. I mean, sometimes it turns out to be true, and in that case, the belief system is coinciding with the chronological events in the actual historical timeline, but sometimes it's not. And here's another point, though, that I've encountered while I was looking into conspiracy theories a lot in 2019 and 2020. It is that conspiracy theorists use real facts. They don't simply make everything up. I mean, maybe that conspiracy theory about the lost episode of The Cleveland Show is made up, but many times they use real facts. However, they just use fictitious connections to unify them, or maybe they can be some type of unexplained phenomena, and it is simply not able to be encapsulated into words at the moment. We don't know what happened. It's unexplained. So then the end result is a conspiracy theory, and Noam Chomsky, of all people, heavily denounced this when he put out his book 9/11, one that received a lot of criticism and praise in different ways. I mean, some people spoke very negatively of it, some people spoke very positively of it, but what Noam Chomsky said was, sometimes coincidence, contradiction, and the unexplained exist, and it doesn't mean that they are significant of any fact or conclusion by themselves. And the way that he provided an example for this was the scientific experiment. Like, what happens when you mix baking soda and vinegar? You get a volcano, right? It creates a very large eruption of foam, right? Well, if you were to mix baking soda and vinegar and you get a volcano, like an eruption of foam, and the lights go out, well, that's just a coincidence. It doesn't mean that your experiment actually made the lights go out. There could be another reason, but if somebody were definitely going to make the connection that, oh, my little elementary school science project made the lights go out, therefore mixing baking soda and vinegar kills electricity or something. It's that same type of thought process. There are real facts and real events that are taking place, but someone created a fictitious connection in their own mind. But Noam Chomsky's 9/11 was heavily criticized by some people, saying that he just told people to stop investigating. And he told people that, oh yeah, there's nothing there, so you don't have to look and you don't have to try. And there is something that is fundamentally wrong about that, because we do want to learn, and we do want to investigate, and we do want to actually know the truth. And if you just say, no, there's nothing there, I'm not going to look into that, that can set a very bad precedent. However, because this is mostly a true crime channel, I have said, though, that I even have reasonable limits, though, on something like that, based on it. Even after everything I just said, we need to investigate, we need to learn more. I do have reasonable limits. Let's say, for example, someone were to say that Jack the Ripper or the Zodiac Killer were not a real person. It was a ghost, or it was the aliens, or it was a Bigfoot using one of his miniature forms or something. I wouldn't do an episode on that, because I think that at that point you would just have to make the claim that there is nothing more to investigate. Like, no, absolutely not. That's just altering the fabric of reality at a certain point. There are reasonable limits. And the final note that I will leave you with is not connected to the comedians, but rather the cartoon conspiracy about how there's the lost episode of The Cleveland Show. And that is something that it was hard for me to comprehend back in 2018 when I was doing some episodes on that. A very, very unpopular subject that people don't want to hear about anymore. They used to love them in the past, but they would talk about all of these hidden things in cartoon shows, and they would refer to them as conspiracy theories. And I was like, well, wait a second, are these really conspiracy theories? Like, there's a lost episode of The Cleveland Show, or there's some type of hidden meaning in shows like Ed, Edd and Eddy, or the show Recess. And the Ed, Edd and Eddy one is actually that all the kids are living in purgatory, and on the show Recess, that all the kids are ghosts. Like those types of hidden meanings. I was like, are those really conspiracy theories? But the definition that I use on this channel is 2 or more people plotting and planning, usually for a malicious reason. And yes, that would fall into that category. If people are hiding the truth, for whatever reason it is, usually for a malicious reason, not always, but that would mean that some people have some type of truth that they want to hide from the general public. And I did do one episode once on the Pinky and the Brain cartoon conspiracy that, if you ever watched that show from the 90s, that the Brain is actually not the smarter person of the group. He's not as brainy as Pinky, and that Pinky is the genius. There are reasons that they point out to that, and I could sum up the whole episode in one sentence, maybe one sentence with semicolons, and that is that it's meant to show about how some people have a high IQ and academic intelligence, other people have social intelligence, and that they're very good at interacting with other people, and just because someone is very good at calculations, it doesn't mean that they're going to be good at making friends, and there's like this counterbalance and contrast. Oh, but there's another lost episode, and it really isn't an exactly like a serial one, but it's the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown with Charlie Brown and Linus and such, and that relates to how Charles Schulz, the creator of the Peanuts comic strip, who made Charlie Brown and Snoopy, he wanted to start a new religion because he was in financial trouble, and he wanted to create a new religious icon, thus being the Great Pumpkin. And that's why that was created. And in the actual original It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, it was meant to terrify children, and it has like Lucy in a mental institution, and Linus is reading from the Book of the Dead, and it was just meant to be so horrific that it couldn't be aired. Now, is that actually true? I don't think so, because of the simpler explanation that has been provided by Schultz himself. What would happen if a kid got his holidays mixed up? And because if you ever watched It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, it's about how there's this great pumpkin that Linus believes in, and he thinks that it's going to do things like Santa Claus, that it's going to bring presents on October 31st. So it's a little bit like Christmas, a little bit like Halloween. Again, I think 0.5% of people would actually believe that there is something where Charles Schultz created some type of horrific Charlie Brown episode that no one has ever seen and that cannot be leaked in any way. They leaked the Star Wars Holiday Special. Okay, that one wasn't leaked. The Star Wars Christmas Holiday Special was aired on television, and people recorded it, and then they copied it, and they would sell it at conventions. If you haven't watched that, please do, only because George Lucas asked us not to, and there was the one piece of Star Wars that he said, please do not watch, and you get to see Chewbacca's wife, and I think she's like making a salad or something in that, and Carrie Fisher thought that it was so stupid, like playing Princess Leia, that she just decided to get really drunk throughout the entire filming. That is like one of the most amazing things ever created. But I want to be very clear. Number one, I don't think that Bill Hicks is Alex Jones. Number two, it's most likely that these lost episodes do not actually exist. I think that someone is just making up a story and seeing how far it will go online or people will believe anything and such. And number three, I don't know how Dr. Seuss could have served as a brainwashing corruption agent specifically targeting black people. Why? Just why? Well, anyway, what do you have to say about any of the comedians who were taken before their time? If you want to weigh in on some of the more true crime aspects of this and talking about the death of Sam Kinison and the legal sentencing and like if you thought that there was a fair ruling in that, I would love to read your comments down below. If you have anything to say about the comedian Bill Hicks or the comedian Ralphie May, please weigh in the comments section down below. I would love to read your messages. And that's all for me now, so I will see you guys over on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Oh, yeah, but everybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com. There's a link to that in the description box, as well as my personal Facebook, which is also there. And there's also a Facebook page for Black Box Online Radio. But I will see you over on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Until next time.